There's a kind of loneliness nobody teaches you how to name. It isn't the loneliness of an empty house. I know that one. I buried my husband Harold 4 years ago, and I learned every shape of that silence. The way the kettle whistles louder when there's only one cup on the counter. The way the bed feels wider on his side even though I haven't slept there since the funeral. No, this is a different loneliness. This is the loneliness of being surrounded by people who love you, and slowly realizing that none of them are actually looking at you anymore. My name is Jenny Washington. I'm 64 years old. I worked 37 years as a nurse at Memorial Health in Savannah, Georgia, the last 12 as charge nurse in the emergency department. I raised one son. I buried one husband. I've delivered babies, held dying hands, cleaned wounds most people couldn't look at without turning away. I thought I knew every kind of pain a body could hold. I was wrong. I'm sitting in my green velvet armchair as I tell you this, the one Harold bought me for my 50th birthday. It's by the window, where I can see the magnolia tree out front. There's a cup of tea on the little side table beside me, chamomile, with a touch of something my daughter-in-law Brianna started adding 3 years ago. It's good for your blood pressure, Mama J, she told me. Just an old family recipe from my grandmother. I drank that tea every morning for 3 years. Every single morning. Over 1,000 mornings. And I'm going to tell you how I finally stopped. But first, I need you to understand who I was before. Because the worst part of what happened to me wasn't the tea. It wasn't the lies. It wasn't even the plan they had for me. The worst part was how slowly I disappeared, and how long it took me to notice I was gone. Let me tell you how it started. Not with a scream, with a cup of tea. Spring of 2019, 6 months before Harold's stroke. I want you to picture my house. Not the way it looks now. Not the way it looked during the years I'm about to tell you about. The way it looked when it was still mine. It's a Victorian on Abercorn Street, painted the soft blue-gray of a Savannah morning, with white trim that Harold repainted every 3 years because he said a house is like a marriage. If you don't keep up with the small things, one day you wake up and the whole thing needs replacing. The porch wraps around the front and the east side, and in spring the magnolia in the yard drops its white blossoms like a wedding you didn't know you were attending. Inside, everything smelled like chicory coffee and Murphy's oil soap. That was my grandmother's house smell. My grandmother from Lafayette, Louisiana, who taught me how to make coffee the old way, with chicory and sweetened condensed milk, strong enough that a spoon could almost stand up in it. Harold used to laugh at me. "Jenny, you don't drink that coffee. You negotiate with it." He'd sing in the shower every morning. Sam Cooke, mostly. "A change is gonna come." His voice wasn't good, but it was warm, and after 42 years of marriage, warm is worth more than good. I made buttermilk biscuits on Saturday mornings. My mother's recipe, her mother's before her. Cold butter, cut in with 2 knives. Never a pastry blender, my grandmother said that bruised the flour. The trick is you barely mix it. You fold it quick, like you're hiding a secret. Then you pat it out with your hands, never a rolling pin, and you cut the biscuits with a juice glass because that's what we always used. On Sunday mornings, I'd make a bigger batch, and Harold would drive a plate down to Reverend Pritchard at the church before service. Samuel Pritchard had been Harold's best friend since they were 9 years old, barefoot boys running through the marshes of Pin Point. When Harold died, Reverend Pritchard preached his funeral with tears running into his collar, and he said, "Harold Washington loved 2 women his whole life, his mother and that woman sitting right there, and he never could tell which one he loved more." The garden was mine. Harold had the house. I had the garden. I had a fig tree in the back that I planted the year Terry was born, and by 2019 it was tall enough to shade the whole patio. Rosemary along the walkway. My grandmother said rosemary was for remembrance, and I believed her. Red dahlias, the color of claret, in a row by the fence. 4 pots of them, one for each decade Harold and I had been together. He always said if he died first, he wanted to be buried under those dahlias. I told him we'd sell the house one day and move somewhere smaller. He shook his head. "Jenny, you're not going anywhere. Not from this house. Not from that garden." He was right about that, about a lot of things. I worked my whole career at Memorial Health. I started in 1982 as a new graduate, 20 years old, terrified of every doctor on the floor. By the time I retired in 2019, I'd seen 3 generations of Savannah come through those doors. I delivered babies in the elevator when labor came too fast. I'd held the hand of a boy my son's age while he died of a gunshot wound on Montgomery Street. I'd learned to read a body the way some people read the weather. You feel the change before you see it. I used to be proud of that. I used to say, nobody can hide a sickness from me, not in my ER. I'll come back to that. It's important. Terry and Brianna had been married 2 years that spring. My son Terrence Washington, we called him Terry from the cradle, was 36, a civil engineer working for a firm in Atlanta that was expanding into Savannah. He met Brianna at a wedding in Charleston, and 3 months later, he brought her home to meet us. I liked her then. I want you to know that. I want you to know I wasn't one of those mothers-in-law who hated the girl on sight and waited for her chance to be proven right. I liked Brianna Holloway. She was 31 when they met, tall, beautiful, with her hair always perfectly done and a laugh that filled a room. She worked in real estate. She called me Mama J from the first weekend, and when Harold made his bad jokes at the dinner table, she laughed louder than anybody, which is the kind of thing a mother notices and forgives a lot of faults for. Their son Malik was born in August of 2018. He came 3 weeks early and spent his first 10 days in the NICU, and I was the one who sat with him overnight when Brianna couldn't, because a nurse knows how to be useful in a hospital in a way a new mother doesn't. I'd hold him on my chest and sing to him. The old songs, the ones my grandmother sang to me in Lafayette when I was too little to remember the words. Hush, little baby, don't say a word. That was my grandson. That was my Malik. He was the brightest baby I ever saw. And I'm saying that as a nurse, not a grandmother. I've watched thousands of babies in my life, and I know the difference between a fussy one and a bright one. Malik tracked faces from the first week. He reached for specific toys by 4 months. At 7 months, he was pulling himself up on the coffee table and babbling whole strings of almost words. I want you to remember that. Because what happened later, it didn't happen to a quiet baby. It happened to the brightest baby I'd ever seen. Harold gave me that armchair for my 50th birthday, the green velvet one. I'm sitting in it right now. He drove me to a little antique store on Bull Street and made me close my eyes the last block. When I opened them, there it was in the window, this impossible emerald green velvet wingback, the color of Spanish moss, if Spanish moss knew it was supposed to be beautiful. I cried right there on the sidewalk. He held my hand and said, "Jenny, every queen needs a throne." We put it by the front window where I could see the street. Every evening for 14 years I sat in that chair, and he sat in his recliner across from me. He read the paper. I knitted, or I read, or I just watched the magnolia tree. Miss Dolores Gadsden, my neighbor for 31 years, walked her little dog Pepper past my window every evening at 7:15, and she'd wave and I'd wave. And sometimes, if the weather was nice, I'd step out onto the porch and we'd talk for an hour about nothing important. The pearl necklace was another anniversary gift. Our 40th, our ruby, technically, but Harold said rubies were for flashy people and pearls were for Jenny. Single strand, cream-colored, with a small gold clasp. I wore them every Sunday to Ebenezer Baptist. 40 years of Sundays, and I never missed one unless I was on shift at the hospital. My grandmother's lemon honey tea recipe was in my head, not on paper. That was how she taught me, and how I'd meant to teach my granddaughter one day, if I ever had one. 3 lemons, zest and juice. Local honey, the darker the better. Fresh mint from the garden. A pinch of ginger. Steep the black tea strong, then cut it with the lemon-honey mixture until the color is like a Savannah sunset. My grandmother said it cured any sickness that wasn't already killing you. And for everything else, it gave you the strength to face it. That recipe is in my head. I want you to remember that too. Harold had his stroke on October 14th, 2019. I was in the kitchen. I heard him fall in the hallway. I knew before I got to him. He lived 3 more days in Memorial Health. My hospital, my floor, the nurses I'd trained. They let me stay in the room. On the second night, he woke up long enough to squeeze my hand and say, "Jenny." Just that, just my name, like it was the whole conversation. He died at 4:17 on a Wednesday morning. I went home that afternoon. I walked into my house and I sat down in that green velvet chair, and I looked at his recliner across from me, and I realized I don't know how to sit alone in this room. That was my world before. Full. So full I didn't know I was living in it until it began to disappear. Piece by piece. Like fog burning off in the morning sun. Terry and Brianna moved into the Abercorn house with me 3 weeks after Harold's funeral. It wasn't a dramatic conversation. Brianna brought it up over dinner one Sunday, gently, the way you'd suggest a sweater to someone who looks cold. "Mama J, this house is so big, and Terry's been driving back and forth from Atlanta every weekend to check on you. What if we just stayed? Just for a little while, until you feel steady." Terry looked at me with those eyes he's had since he was a little boy. The please don't make me choose eyes. And I was 60, and I was tired, and I was still waking up at 4:17 in the morning every night, and the idea of not being alone in that house sounded like a mercy. I said yes. They moved in the first week of November. Malik was 14 months old then, just starting to walk, and the sound of his little feet on the old oak floors was the first thing that made me laugh after the funeral. The first change was the kitchen cabinets. Brianna reorganized them. She told me about it after, cheerfully, like she was giving me a gift. "Mama J, I moved your good china up to the top shelf. You shouldn't be reaching down to the low cabinets at your age. It's bad for your back. I put the everyday dishes right here where you can get them." The good china was my mother's, blue willow pattern. My mother brought those dishes up from Louisiana in 1961 when she married my father and moved to Savannah. I'd eaten off those plates every Christmas of my life. The top shelf was too high for me to reach without a stool, but Brianna said it kindly, and she'd already done it, and what was I going to do? Tell my grieving son's wife to put my mother's dishes back? So I said, "Thank you, sweetheart. That was thoughtful," and I didn't eat off those plates again. I want you to understand something. I want you to understand it now, before the rest of this story gets hard. Nobody in my house was evil. Not in year one. Maybe not ever. Not in the way you think of evil. Brianna wasn't a monster moving into my home with a plan. She was, I believed then, and sometimes I still believe now, she was a woman who genuinely wanted to help a grieving mother-in-law. And somewhere along the way, helping turned into managing, and managing turned into something else. I can't tell you the exact day it changed. That's the thing about slow erosion. You never see the grain of sand that falls. You just wake up one day, and the beach is different. Year 2, Brianna started making me tea in the mornings. It started in the spring. I'd been sleeping badly, still waking up at 4:17, still feeling Harold's absence on the other side of the bed. One Saturday morning, she came downstairs with 2 cups. "Mama J, I made you something. My grandmother used to make it for my grandfather when he couldn't sleep. Chamomile with lavender and a little something extra, an old Gullah recipe. It's supposed to be good for the blood pressure, too." It tasted fine, a little bitter under the honey, but fine. "How do you feel?" she asked an hour later. "A little calmer, I think." "Good. I'll make it for you every morning, just for a while, until you're sleeping better." Every morning, for a while. I want you to notice how reasonable that sounds. I want you to notice how I thought it was reasonable. Terry was traveling more that year. The Atlanta firm had given him a promotion, and he was managing a highway project that took him away 3 or 4 nights a week. When he was home on weekends, he was tired. He'd kiss me on the forehead and spend most of Saturday with Malik and most of Sunday on his laptop. Malik was 3 that year, and that was the year Brianna first said the words, "Mama J, I'm a little worried about Malik. He's not talking as much as the other kids at his playgroup." Now, I'd watched that child every day for 3 years. I'd watched him babble complete sentences at 18 months. Not real words, but the melody of sentences, with pauses and emphasis, the way babies sound when they're about to start talking any minute. I'd watched him point to pictures in books and make the connection between the apple on the page and the apple on his high chair. He wasn't a quiet child. He was a watchful one. That's different. But Brianna was his mother, and I was a nurse, and I knew better than to contradict a mother about her own child. So I said, "Some kids just talk later, sweetheart. Terry didn't say much of anything until he was almost 3, and look at him now." "I know," she said, "but I think we should have him evaluated, just to be safe." She took him to a specialist. She came home with paperwork. Speech and language delay with possible developmental concerns. They want to monitor him. I asked if I could see the paperwork. She said she'd left it at the doctor's office by accident. I let it go. I want to tell you, I should have pressed. I was a nurse. I knew what to ask for. I knew my rights as a grandmother, not legal rights, but the rights that come with having loved a child since before he took his first breath. But I was 61 and I was tired, And every morning Brianna handed me a cup of tea and told me I was looking a little pale, and by that autumn I was napping in the afternoons. Me, Jenny Washington, who used to work double shifts in the ER and still come home and weed the garden. The smallest moment of year 2 happened in October. I was in the back garden with Malik. He was pulling up weeds the way a 3-year-old pulls up weeds, mostly pulling up my basil by accident. I knelt down beside him and I said quietly, just between us, "Baby, do you want to talk to Grandma? You can. It's okay." And he looked at me. I want you to understand that look. His eyes were bright, present, not confused, not delayed, not struggling, present in a way I hadn't seen any paperwork describe. He looked at me like he was about to say something, and then Brianna's voice came from the kitchen window. "Malik, come inside, baby. It's getting chilly." He turned his face away from me and walked back to the house. I told myself I'd imagined it. A nurse with 37 years of reading bodies, and I told myself I'd imagined it. This was the year the afternoons started to disappear. I'd drink my tea in the morning, and by 2 o'clock I couldn't keep my eyes open. Not tired like I'd been up late, tired like I'd been running. I'd sit down in the green velvet chair to read, and I'd wake up at 4:30 with drool on my shoulder and the book on the floor. "You need your rest, Mama J," Brianna said. "You're allowed to nap. You worked your whole life. Let yourself slow down." The third Thursday of every month since 1994, I'd had breakfast with a group of women from my nursing class at the downtown Waffle House. 7 of us when we started. By 2022, we were down to 4. 2 had died, 1 had moved to Atlanta, but the 4 of us were family. In March of 2022, Brianna called them and canceled for me. "She's been so tired lately. I just don't think she's up to it this month. I'll let you know when she's feeling better." She told me about it afterward, over dinner. "I hope you don't mind. You looked so wiped out this morning. I didn't want you to have to push yourself." I didn't go in April either, or May. By July, I couldn't remember the last time I'd seen Loretta, Diane, or Mary Frances. That was also the year the garden started to die. I didn't have the energy to pull weeds. The fig tree still fruited, but the figs fell and rotted because nobody picked them. The rosemary went woody. The red dahlias, my 4 pots, 1 for each decade, they struggled through the summer and then just stopped blooming. Brianna hired a landscaping service. "Just to keep things tidy while you're resting, Mama J. You can take it back over whenever you feel ready." The landscapers pulled out the dahlias. They said they were diseased. They replaced them with boxwoods and ornamental grass. I cried that night, quietly in the guest bathroom, so nobody would hear. One Sunday morning in September, I got dressed for church. I put on my Sunday dress. I went to reach for the pearl necklace, Harold's pearls, and my hand was shaking so badly I couldn't work the clasp. I went downstairs without them. Brianna was in the kitchen. She looked at me and said, "Mama J, you look so tired. Why don't you stay home today? I'll call Reverend Pritchard and tell him you're under the weather. He'll understand." I sat down at the kitchen table. My legs gave out a little when I sat. "Maybe just this once," I said. That was the first Sunday in 40 years I missed Ebenezer Baptist. The pearls stayed in the jewelry box. Miss Dolores Gadsden came to the door on a Tuesday in February. I was upstairs, resting. The doorbell rang. I heard Brianna answer it. I heard Miss Dolores's voice, that particular gullah-inflected Savannah drawl, saying, "I just came by to check on Jenny. I haven't seen her out on the porch in months. Is she all right?" And I heard Brianna say, in a voice I'd never heard her use before, "Miss Gadsden, I appreciate you coming by, but Mama J isn't really herself these days. She's been having some memory issues. Sometimes she doesn't quite recognize people she should know. We're trying to keep her environment calm and familiar. Maybe another time?" Memory issues. Doesn't quite recognize people she should know. I stood at the top of the stairs and I couldn't move. I recognized Miss Dolores. I recognized her voice through 2 floors and a closed door. I could have told you what she was wearing without looking. Her blue coat, because it was February, and the yellow scarf her daughter crocheted for her. But I didn't come downstairs. I don't know why I didn't come downstairs. That's one of the things I'm still trying to understand. Maybe because I'd been so tired for so long that the idea of walking down the stairs and contradicting Brianna in her own voice felt like more than my body could do. Maybe because somewhere underneath the exhaustion I'd started to wonder if she was right. If my memory really was going. If I'd become the woman she was describing to Miss Dolores without noticing it. Miss Dolores never came back. I learned later that Brianna had told 2 other neighbors the same thing. By the end of 2023, nobody on Abercorn Street knocked on our door anymore. In June, Terry and Brianna had a conversation I wasn't supposed to hear. Their bedroom was above the kitchen. There's an old heating vent in the kitchen ceiling that connects to the floor of their room. The previous owners had blocked it off, but not well, and if you stood on the stool by the pantry, you could hear almost everything. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop. I was getting the sugar down. But I heard Brianna say, "Terry, baby, I think we have to start being realistic about your mother. The forgetfulness, the confusion. This is how dementia starts. We need to think about the future." And I heard my son, my beautiful, tired son who loved me, say, I know, but she's only 63. Early onset is a real thing, Terry, and we need to protect her, and the house, and ourselves. If she signs something she doesn't understand, if she falls for a scam, we could lose everything. This house is worth almost $700,000. We have to think long term. I climbed down off the stool. I sat down at my kitchen table, my mother's table, that her mother had brought up from Lafayette in 1961. I put my hands flat on the wood, the way my grandmother used to when she was thinking about something hard. The future. That word lodged itself in me like a splinter, and I couldn't get it out. That was the year I tried, once, to make my grandmother's lemon honey tea. I got out the lemons. I got out the honey. I got out the pot. And I stood at the counter, and I could not remember the ratio. I'd made that recipe 100 times, 1,000 times. I'd made it for Harold when he had a cold. I'd made it for Terry every winter of his childhood. My hands knew it. My nose knew it. But I stood there, and the numbers were gone. I sat down on the kitchen floor, and I cried. Not loud, just quiet, shaking crying, the kind you do when you don't have the energy for the real thing. Brianna found me there. She knelt down beside me, and she put her arm around my shoulders, and she said, "Oh, Mama J, don't worry. I already made your tea. It's right here on the counter. Drink this. You'll feel better." I drank it. Early 2024, by March of 2024, I barely left my bedroom. The green velvet chair had been moved. I don't know when exactly. I hadn't been downstairs enough to notice. But one afternoon I came down to get a glass of water, and I looked at the spot by the front window where my chair had been for 14 years, and it wasn't there. Brianna had moved it. She'd put it in the corner by the bookshelf, half hidden behind a large potted fiddle-leaf fig. The spot by the window, my spot where I'd watched Harold read his paper for 14 years, had been taken over by a new console table with a lamp I didn't recognize. "We needed more light in the living room," Brianna said when she saw me looking. "That chair was blocking the window. Don't worry, it's still in the room. You can sit in it whenever you want." I didn't sit in it. Not once. Not in the corner behind the fig tree. Sitting there would have meant admitting that the chair had been moved, and admitting the chair had been moved would have meant admitting everything else. And I wasn't ready. I heard her on the phone one afternoon in February. She was in the back office, the little room that had been Harold's study. The door was mostly closed, but not all the way. "Yes, I understand the process. We've been documenting for almost 3 years now. Her doctor has noted cognitive decline in the chart. No, she's not dangerous, just confused. We're looking at filing for conservatorship before the end of the year. Yes, the house, the retirement accounts, everything." Conservatorship. I was a nurse for 37 years. I knew what that word meant. I'd watched it happen to patients' families. I'd watched adult children take over the legal personhood of their parents, sign their checks, decide their medical care, move them into facilities they didn't choose. I stood in the hallway outside Harold's study, and I thought, that's me. She's talking about me. And then I went back upstairs and I lay down because I was so tired. But there is one more moment I need to tell you about before we get to the morning everything changed. It was a Tuesday in early March. I came downstairs for breakfast, the way I did every morning, slowly, holding the banister, feeling 80 years old in a 64-year-old body. Brianna was out at a real estate showing. Terry was in Atlanta, as usual. The house was quiet. I sat at the kitchen table. The cup of tea was already there. Brianna pre-made them now. She'd make a thermos before she left in the morning and pour me a cup, still hot, with a little note sometimes. "Love you, Mama J." I picked up the cup. Malik walked into the kitchen. He was 7 years old. He was holding his stuffed elephant, the same one I'd given him for his 2nd birthday, worn almost gray now. He was wearing his Spider-Man pajamas. He stopped in the doorway. He looked at the cup in my hand. He looked at my face. And then, very slowly, very deliberately, he shook his head. Just once. Small. A no. Then he turned around and walked back out of the kitchen. I set the cup down. My hand was shaking. I sat there for a long time. I don't know how long. The tea got cold in front of me. The morning light moved across the kitchen floor. Across my mother's kitchen floor that I hadn't really looked at in years. I had spent 64 years on this earth. I had saved hundreds of lives in that emergency department. I had buried my husband. I had raised my son. I had loved my grandson since before he was born. But the moment my supposedly nonverbal grandson shook his head at the cup in my hand, that was the first time in 3 years that I felt someone was actually seeing me. I didn't drink the tea. I poured it down the sink. And I stood at the kitchen window, looking out at what used to be my garden, at the boxwoods where my red dahlias used to be. And for the first time in a very long time, I started to listen to something that wasn't Brianna's voice. I started to listen to my own. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in my bed, the bed Harold and I had shared for 38 years, and I watched the ceiling fan turn slowly in the dark. I thought about the tea I hadn't drunk. I thought about the way Malik had shaken his head. I thought about 100 small things from the last 3 years that I had let myself not see. A nurse learns to trust her eyes. A nurse learns that when something doesn't look right, it usually isn't. I had looked away from my own life for 3 years, and I had called it grief, and I had called it age, and I had called it the price of being loved. But somewhere around 3 in the morning, lying there in the dark, I said to myself, out loud, quietly, "Jenny, you're a nurse. Look at the patient." The patient was me. And when I finally looked at her, really looked at her, the chart wrote itself. Progressive fatigue, worse in the afternoons. Memory lapses without an underlying neurological pattern. I could still remember 1987 with perfect clarity, but couldn't remember what I'd done yesterday. Social withdrawal that hadn't started with me. It had been done to me. Cognitive symptoms that improved overnight and worsened within an hour of breakfast, within an hour of breakfast, within an hour of the tea. I didn't sleep, but for the first time in 3 years, I didn't need to. The next morning I came downstairs early, earlier than Brianna. I heard her in the shower upstairs. Terry was still in Atlanta. Malik was already at the kitchen table. He had a bowl of cereal in front of him that he wasn't eating. He was waiting. He looked up when I came in. I sat down across from him. I didn't say anything for a minute. I just looked at him. I looked at my grandson, really looked at him, for the first time in I don't know how long. And I saw what I had been refusing to see. He was watching me the way a 7-year-old shouldn't have to watch anyone, with his whole face, with his whole little body, tracking me. "Malik," I said quietly. "Baby, can you talk to Grandma?" He didn't answer right away. He glanced at the stairs. He listened. I watched him listen, to the sound of the shower running upstairs. He was calculating. A 7-year-old calculating whether it was safe. Then he looked back at me, and he said in a perfectly clear, perfectly normal voice, "Hi, Grandma. I want to tell you what I did in that moment. I want to tell you I was strong. I want to tell you I was a nurse and a grandmother, and I held it together for him. I didn't. I put both my hands over my face and I cried. Not loud. I was still listening to that shower, too. But hard. 3 years of crying that I hadn't let myself do. I cried into my hands at the kitchen table, and my 7-year-old grandson reached across the table and put his small hand on my wrist and said, "It's okay, Grandma. It's okay. I'm here." He was comforting me. 7 years old, and he was comforting me. The shower upstairs turned off. Malik heard it before I did. His hand pulled back. His face did something terrible. It smoothed itself out, emptied itself, the way you pull a blanket over something you don't want anyone to see. He picked up his spoon. He looked down at his cereal. In 4 seconds, my bright, watchful grandson became the quiet, delayed child Brianna had been telling the world about for 3 years. I understood then what had been done to him. Not all of it. That came later. But enough. Enough to know that whatever was happening to me, something worse had been happening to him, for longer. Brianna came downstairs 20 minutes later. She kissed the top of my head. She kissed the top of Malik's head. She poured me tea from the thermos. How did you sleep, Mama J? Not well, I said. I was up most of the night. Oh no. Drink your tea, it'll settle you. I held the cup. I looked at it. I looked at Malik, who was very carefully not looking at me. Thank you, sweetheart, I said, and I lifted the cup toward my mouth. I don't know what I'd do without you. Brianna smiled. She turned to the refrigerator to get the milk. I tipped the cup slowly into the potted pothos on the windowsill. Malik saw. His eyes came up just for a second. And I swear to you, I swear on Harold's grave, that little boy's mouth moved just slightly at the corner. Not a smile. A recognition. We had a secret now. The two of us. Against her. I set the empty cup down. You're right, I said. I feel better already. That afternoon, Brianna went to a showing in Richmond Hill. She'd be gone 3 hours, minimum. I took Malik out to the back porch. I sat him down next to me on the old wooden swing Harold had built the year Terry was born. Baby, I said, I need you to tell me some things, and I need you to know, whatever you tell me, I'm not going to let anyone hurt you. I promise you that on your grandfather's grave. Do you believe me? He thought about it. Really thought about it, the way a 7-year-old does with his whole face. Then he nodded. I believe you, Grandma. When did you stop talking when Mommy was home? When I was 4. Why? He looked down at his hands. He picked at a thread on his jeans. I heard her on the phone. She was talking to a lady. She said the plan a lot. She said, we have to be patient. These things take years to set up right. The kid is a problem because he sees things. I kept my face still. I kept my voice still. And what did you do? I decided I wouldn't be a problem. I decided I wouldn't see things. I practiced in the mirror. I made my face not see things. 7 years old. He had taught himself to go blank in the mirror. Malik, baby, what did Mommy do to make you keep not talking? He didn't answer right away. She told me, he said finally, that if I ever talked in front of other people, they would take me away, because something was wrong with me. And if I talked, they would know something was wrong with me, and they would put me in a hospital where kids go when they're too broken to live with their families. And I would never see you or Daddy again. When did she tell you this? When I was 5. I said Mama once at the doctor's office. He got excited. Mommy told him it was a one-time thing, not real talking. She took me home and she told me what would happen if I ever did it again. I closed my eyes. I took a breath. I counted to 3 the way I used to in the ER when a code was coming in and I needed my hand steady. Did she ever hurt you, baby? Physically? He shook his head. No, she doesn't hit. She just talks. She talks until you don't know what's real. That's the worst kind. I knew that from the ER, too. The bruises heal. The talking, done right, never does. Okay, I said. Okay, now tell me about the tea. I thought he was going to tell me about poison. Sitting on that porch swing, watching my grandson's face, I had already built the story in my head. Brianna was trying to kill me. It was the simplest explanation. The oldest explanation. The story you see on the news. The daughter-in-law who poisons the grandmother for the house. I was wrong. She's not trying to kill you, Grandma, Malik said. I stared at him. What? She said it on the phone. She said, it's safer this way. Dead people get autopsies. Confused people get guardians. I couldn't breathe for a second. Malik, I need you to tell me exactly what she's been putting in my tea. Little white pills. She crushes them. She keeps them in a tin in her sock drawer. I looked once when she was showering. The bottle inside says low something. I can't say it. Lorazepam. Yes, that one. And sometimes a blue one. She says the blue ones are for sleep, but just a little. I know those drugs. Every nurse knows those drugs. Low-dose lorazepam, an anti-anxiety medication, given consistently to an older adult over a long period of time, produces exactly the symptoms Brianna had been describing to everyone in my life. Fatigue, confusion, memory problems, social withdrawal. The exact clinical picture of early dementia. And here's the terrible genius of it. At the doses Malik was describing, it wouldn't kill me. It wouldn't even really hurt me, medically. It would just make me look like I was losing my mind. Long enough, convincingly enough, documented by a primary care doctor who was seeing a slow decline over 3 years. That's a conservatorship petition that would walk through any probate court in Georgia. Brianna would become my legal guardian. She would control my accounts. She would control the house. She would be able to sell it, mortgage it, move me into a memory care facility if she wanted to. And the worst part, the part that made me understand the real horror of what she'd done, was that if they moved me into a facility and stopped the tea, I would seem to stabilize. I'd seem better. And everyone would say, "See, the professionals are helping her. She was right to be placed there. Brianna did the right thing." She wasn't trying to kill me. She was trying to make me disappear while I was still breathing. "Grandma," Malik said after a long silence, "there's something else. Tell me, baby." "Daddy knows, a little bit. Not about the tea, but some." The porch swing creaked. I pushed off with my toe to keep it moving because I needed to keep something moving. "What do you mean, baby?" "He signed papers. Last year. I saw them on the kitchen counter. They said evaluation and cognitive and some big words. Mommy told him it was just to protect you, in case somebody tried to scam you. He signed them." "Did he read them?" "He looked tired. He didn't read them. He just signed." My son, my Terry. Harold and I raised him to be a good man, and he is a good man. But good men with tired wives sign papers they don't read. It happens every day in this country. It happens in the best families. I wasn't angry at him. Not yet. That would come later, and it would come and go for a long time. But sitting there on the porch swing with my grandson, all I could feel for my son was a deep, tired sorrow. He hadn't looked at me either. For 3 years he hadn't looked at his own mother, because the woman he loved had told him a story about me, and he'd accepted it the way a tired man accepts anything that lets him go to sleep. "Does Daddy know Mommy gives me something in my tea?" I asked. "No." Malik was firm about this. "He doesn't know that part, I'm sure. He would be sad. He would stop her." "Okay, baby, okay." I pulled him against my side. He was warm. He was smaller than a 7-year-old should be, I noticed. He hadn't been eating well for a long time either, and I had been too foggy to notice my own grandson was shrinking. "I'm going to fix this," I told him. "I'm going to fix this, and I'm going to fix it carefully, and you don't have to be scared anymore. Do you understand me?" "Yes, Grandma." "And you don't have to pretend for me anymore. When it's just us, you can be exactly who you are." He thought about this for a long time. Then he said quietly, "I don't know who I am, Grandma. I've been pretending so long I don't remember what I was before. That broke something in me that I didn't know was still whole." "Then we'll find out together," I said. "Me and you. We'll find out who we both are again." I need to tell you about the next morning, about the bathroom mirror. I have been putting this off because it's hard to explain, and I don't want to make it sound bigger than it was. It wasn't a big moment from the outside. Nothing happened. I didn't say a speech. Nobody was there. But from the inside, it was the biggest moment of the last 4 years of my life. I woke up at 4:30 in the morning. That was early for me. I'd been sleeping until 8 or 9 under the effects of the tea. But I'd only had half a cup in 3 days now, and my body was coming back. I walked to the bathroom. I turned on the light, and I looked at myself. The woman in the mirror was 64 years old. Her hair was mostly gray. She hadn't colored it in over a year. Her skin was the color of strong tea with milk, the same color it had been her whole life, but her eyes were pouched and dull. She was wearing a nightgown she'd worn 3 nights in a row, the old cotton one with the faded flowers, because she hadn't had the energy to do laundry, and Brianna had stopped doing hers separately a long time ago. I looked at her. I looked at Jenny Washington, and I said to her, out loud, to the mirror, "Where did you go?" She didn't answer right away. She just looked at me with her tired eyes. I said, "You were a nurse for 37 years. You ran a trauma floor. Doctors asked for you by name. You delivered Mrs. Henley's grandbaby in the elevator in 1996 because the labor came too fast. Do you remember that?" She nodded slowly. Yes, she remembered. "You raised a son by yourself for 2 years while Harold was deployed. You worked doubles and you made him pancakes every Saturday morning, and you never once let him see you cry. Do you remember that?" Yes. "You sat with your grandmother when she died. You held her hand and you sang her the song she used to sing to you. You were 23 years old and you didn't flinch. Do you remember that?" Yes. You taught Brianna Holloway's cousin how to breastfeed in Memorial Health's postpartum unit in 2011. Did you know that?" her cousin Shanice. You wouldn't remember her, she was one of 1,000, but she remembered you. She sent you a Christmas card every year for 5 years until she moved. You are the woman who teaches other women how to keep their babies alive. Do you remember that?" The woman in the mirror started to cry. I didn't stop. "You are Harold Washington's wife. You were his whole sky. He told you that in the parking lot of the Piggly Wiggly on Victory Drive in 1979, and he never took it back. Not for 42 years. Not once. Do you remember that?" "Yes." "Then where did you go?" She looked at me. I looked at her. Neither of us answered for a long time. Then I said the thing I needed to say, the thing I hadn't been able to say for 3 years. "I see you, Jenny, I see you. I'm sorry I let them make you disappear. I'm sorry I was so tired I stopped looking. I'm back now. I'm coming back for you." I washed my face with cold water. I went to the bedroom and I opened the top drawer of my dresser, and I took out the pearl necklace Harold gave me for our 40th anniversary. My hands didn't shake. I worked the clasp the first try. I put on my Sunday dress. It was a Thursday, but I didn't care. The navy one with the white collar that Harold had always said made me look like I was about to preach a sermon. I walked downstairs. I made my own cup of coffee, chicory and condensed milk, the way my grandmother taught me. I didn't measure the condensed milk. My hands remembered. I sat down at the kitchen table, my mother's table, and I waited for my daughter-in-law to come downstairs. I wasn't going to confront her. Not yet. That was important. Because here's what 37 years in an emergency department teach you more than anything else. When you catch something dangerous, you don't announce it. You document it. You call the right people. You build the case before you move the patient. Because if you move too soon, you lose everything. I was going to be the calmest patient Brianna had ever tried to poison. She came downstairs at 7. She was dressed for a showing. Cream blouse, navy skirt, the heels she kept by the door. She stopped when she saw me. "Mama J, you're up early and dressed." "I couldn't sleep," I said. "I feel better than I have in months. I think I'm going to go for a walk this morning." She blinked. I saw her recalculating. "A walk? Are you sure? You haven't been out much. It's still chilly." "Just around the block. I need some air." She made my tea. She poured it into the cup in front of me. She sat down across from me with her own coffee and she watched me. I picked up the cup. I brought it to my lips. I tilted it just enough to feel the liquid touch my mouth, not enough to actually drink. I said. "This is good today." She smiled. "Are you wearing your pearls?" she said. "I just felt like it," I said. Harold would have liked to see me wearing them. It's been a while. Something flickered in her face. Just for a second. I filed it away. "Well," she said, "they're beautiful on you." "Thank you, sweetheart." When she left for her showing, I poured the tea down the sink. I rinsed the cup. I dried it. Then I went upstairs to my bedroom and I closed the door and I picked up the phone. The first call I made was to Dr. Yvonne Boateng. Dr. Boateng had been Harold's doctor. She was Ghanaian, had come to Savannah in the 90s, opened a small practice on Waters Avenue, and she had loved Harold like a brother. She hadn't been my doctor. I'd kept seeing Dr. Milbrook, the doctor Brianna had transferred me to after Harold died. But Dr. Boateng had known me for 25 years. She picked up on the second ring. "Dr. Boateng's office." "Yvonne," I said. "It's Jenny Washington. I need to see you. Today, if you can. And I need you not to call the house. Don't call Terry. Don't call anyone. I'll explain when I see you." There was a long silence on the other end. A doctor's silence. The kind that's reading between the words. Then she said very gently, "Jenny, come at 11, the back entrance. I'll tell the receptionist you're a personal appointment." "Thank you." "Jenny, are you safe right now?" I thought about that. I thought about the tea I hadn't drunk. I thought about Malik, 7 years old, telling me she doesn't hit, she just talks. "I'm safer than I was yesterday," I said. "I'll tell you the rest when I see you." I walked the 6 blocks to Miss Dolores Gadsden's house. It was the first time I'd been on the sidewalk alone in over a year. I rang her doorbell. I heard Pepper barking. I heard slippers on the hardwood floor. She opened the door. She looked at me. She looked at me for a long time. Then she said, and I will never forget the way she said it, Gullisoft, like a hand on a fevered forehead. "Oh, Jenny, oh, honey, there you are." And that is when I knew that I had been missing. Not just from her house, not just from the church, not just from my own garden. I had been missing from the world. And the world had been waiting for me to come back. Miss Dolores made me lemon honey tea. I sat at her kitchen table and I watched her make it the way my grandmother used to. 3 lemons, zest and juice, local honey dark as molasses, fresh mint from the pot on her windowsill, a pinch of ginger. She didn't measure. Her hands remembered, the way mine used to. She set the cup in front of me. I put my face down over the steam and I smelled my childhood. My grandmother's kitchen in Lafayette, the screen door banging in the summer heat, my mother laughing at something my father said in the next room. I drank it. It tasted like coming home. "Miss Dolores," I said, "I need to tell you some things. And I need you to believe me because the woman you've been hearing about from my daughter-in-law for the last 2 years is not the woman sitting in your kitchen right now. Do you understand me?" She sat down across from me. She reached across the table and took my hand. "Jenny Washington," she said, "I have known you for 31 years. I have never for 1 second believed a word that girl said about you. I kept my mouth shut because it wasn't my business and because you weren't coming to the door. But I knew. Everybody on this street knew. We just didn't know what to do." I started crying again. I seemed to have become a woman who cried now. After 3 years of not being able to feel enough to cry about anything, the tears kept coming for the smallest things. For Miss Dolores saying everybody on this street knew. For knowing I had not been as alone as I'd believed. I told her everything Malik had told me. I told her about the tea, about the lorazepam, about the conservatorship, about Terry signing papers he hadn't read, about a 7-year-old boy teaching himself to go blank in a mirror. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "What do you need from me?" "I need somewhere to go tonight," I said. "After I see Dr. Boateng, I can't sleep in that house anymore, not with what I know. And I need a phone that Brianna can't check. And I need somebody to know where I am in case something happens to me." "You have a room here for as long as you need it," she said. "And my phone is yours. And if something happens to you, Jenny Washington, I will burn that house down myself." I laughed. I hadn't laughed in a long time. It sounded strange coming out of me. "Miss Dolores, I don't need you to burn anything down." I said what I said. Dr. Boateng drew my blood at 11:30. She sat across from me in her small office with the African violets on the windowsill, and she listened to my story with the face of a doctor who has heard many stories. When I finished, she said, "Jenny, I'm going to run a full panel, benzodiazepines, sleep aids, anything else I can think of. I'll have it marked priority. I should have results tomorrow afternoon, maybe sooner." "How long do those drugs stay in the body?" "Lorazepam has a half-life of about 12 to 20 hours. In an older adult with consistent dosing over a long period, we'll see metabolites for days after the last dose. The fact that you've been reducing intake for a few days is actually going to help us. We'll see the pattern of a body clearing the drug, which is more damning than a single positive test." She looked at me over her glasses. "Jenny, I want to say something to you, as your friend, not your doctor." "Okay. Harold came to see me about 3 months before he died." My stomach dropped. "He what?" "He came in for a routine appointment. His blood pressure was fine, everything was fine. But at the end of the appointment, he sat there for a minute and he said, 'Yvonne, I need to ask you something strange. If something ever happens to me, and Jenny comes to see you one day and she doesn't seem like herself, will you promise me you'll pay attention? Will you promise me you won't just tell her she's getting old?'" I couldn't speak. I told him, of course. I thought he was just being Harold. You know how he was, always worried about you. I told him you were the healthiest 60-year-old woman I'd ever met. He said, "It's not her health I'm worried about. It's what happens around her when I'm not there." Dr. Boateng reached into a drawer in her desk. She took out a manila envelope. She slid it across the desk to me. "He left this with me. He said if you ever came to see me alone and you seemed like yourself was missing, to give it to you." I opened the envelope in Miss Dolores's guest room that evening. Inside was a letter in Harold's handwriting. A business card for an attorney in Savannah named Theodore Ashford. Teddy. I remembered Teddy. He'd been in Harold's card-playing group in the 80s. I hadn't seen him in 20 years. And a small brass key with a tag that said, "First Federal Safe Deposit 4412. The letter was 2 pages. Harold's handwriting, that slanted, careful handwriting I'd loved for 42 years, filled both sides of the first page and half of the second. I'll give you the heart of it. The rest is between me and my husband, Jenny, my whole sky. If you're reading this, something's wrong. I don't know what. I hope I'm wrong to be writing it, but I've been watching things the last couple years, and my gut is telling me something my mouth won't say out loud, and you know I trust my gut. I watch the way Brianna looks at this house, Jenny. I watch the way she talks to Terry about money. I watch the way she doesn't quite see you unless she needs something. I don't think she's evil. I don't know what she is, but I know what I see. I've set up some things you don't know about. Teddy Ashford has the paperwork. He's going to be in charge of my real estate. Not the will you know about. A second one. You and I updated the public will together last year, the one Terry knows about, the one where everything goes to you and then to him. That one still stands. But there's a trust, Jenny. A trust I set up 3 years ago that I never told you about, because I didn't want you to worry. The trust holds the house. Not legally in your name anymore, baby. Legally in the trust's name. You have lifetime occupancy and full control, but nobody can take it from you through a conservatorship. Nobody can sell it out from under you. Nobody can use it as collateral. It passes to Terry when you die, and to Malik after Terry, and it cannot be touched before then. I'm sorry I didn't tell you. I wanted you to live in our house without thinking about what I was worried about. There's one more thing, the safe deposit box. My grandmother's rings are in there, for Malik's wife one day if he has one, and some cash. Not a fortune, but enough. And your grandmother's recipe book, the one from Lafayette. I found it in the attic after your mother's funeral in '98, and I put it in the box for safekeeping. 3 lemons, dark honey, pinch of ginger. It's all in there, Jenny. I kept it for you. You are my whole sky. The sky doesn't disappear. Clouds just cover it sometimes. Go find Teddy. He knows what to do. You're Harold. I sat on Miss Dolores's guest bed, and I held that letter, and I cried in a way I hadn't cried even at Harold's funeral. Because at Harold's funeral, I had believed I was alone. And I wasn't. I never had been. He had been holding me up for 4 years from the other side of the ground. I met Teddy Ashford in his office the next morning. He was 71 now, silver hair, same kind eyes. He hugged me at the door and said, "Jenny, I have been praying you would walk through this door for 2 years. I was starting to think you wouldn't." I told him everything. He listened the way Dr. Boateng had. Then he picked up the phone and called a private investigator he worked with, a woman named Adrienne Fowler, former police detective, specialist in elder abuse cases. "I want a full background check on Brianna Holloway, maiden name and married name," he said. "Prior addresses, prior marriages, prior family members, anything that raises a flag. And I want it in 48 hours. It took her 36. Teddy called me at Miss Dolores's on Saturday afternoon. "Jenny, can you come to the office?" I went. He had a folder on his desk. He looked at me with a face I recognized from my ER days, the face you make before you tell a family something they don't want to hear. "Jenny, I need you to sit down." I sat down. "Brianna Holloway was married before," he said. I waited. Her first marriage was in 2014 in Beaufort County, South Carolina. She was 27. Her husband was a man named Walter Pemberton. He was 69 when they married. I closed my eyes. Walter Pemberton owned a pecan farm outside Beaufort, 300 acres. He'd been widowed for 6 years when he met Brianna. He had 2 adult children from his first marriage who opposed the marriage. Brianna cut them out, moved him to a new house, changed his phone, told him they were trying to steal from him. Classic isolation pattern. How did he die, Teddy? Rapidly progressive dementia. That's what the death certificate says. 18 months after the wedding. His daughter tried to contest the will. Brianna inherited everything, but she didn't have the money for a real fight. Brianna sold the farm 6 months after he died, walked away with just under $2 million, moved to Charleston, dropped Pemberton, went back to Holloway, met your son at that wedding in 2016, 8 months later. I sat in Teddy's office and I thought about my son, about how he'd met her at a wedding, about how he'd told me, "Mama, I met somebody. She's beautiful and she laughs at my bad jokes, and I think this might be it." I thought about Walter Pemberton, 69 years old, a widower, a man with family who had tried to protect him and had failed, because they didn't have the money for the fight. His children, I said, Walter's children, are they still alive? Yes. A daughter in Charleston, a son in Atlanta. Adrian has their contact information. I want to call them. Teddy nodded slowly. Jenny, be careful with this. They may not want to talk, and whatever they tell you, we cannot use it directly in our case. Each case has to stand on its own evidence. What we have on Brianna for you is strong. Lorazepam in your blood work, no prescription in your name, Malik as a witness, the documentation of the last 3 years. That is enough. I don't want to use it against her, Teddy. I want to call his daughter and tell her I believe her. Whatever she tried to say that nobody believed, I believe her. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, Jenny Washington, I am so glad you're back. I called Walter Pemberton's daughter that night. Her name was Ruth. She was 54, a librarian in Charleston. When I told her who I was and why I was calling, she didn't speak for almost a full minute. Then she said, oh my God, my father, my father. She cried. I cried with her. I told her I was sorry nobody had believed her. She told me to run. I called my son on a Tuesday. It had been 8 days since I'd left the house. Brianna had been frantic. She'd called Miss Dolores's house 4 times. Miss Dolores told her I was resting and wasn't taking calls. She'd called Terry home from Atlanta. She'd filed a missing persons report on day 3, and the Savannah police had come to Miss Dolores's door, and I had met them in Miss Dolores's living room, calm and clear-eyed and dressed, and I had told them very politely that I was a grown woman staying with a friend, and the report was closed by dinner time, but I hadn't spoken to Terry yet. That was the call I'd been saving. That was the one that mattered. I called him, and I said, Terry, meet me at Clary's Cafe at 4 o'clock on Thursday. By yourself. Don't tell Brianna where you're going. I need you to trust me for 1 hour. That's all I'm asking. There was a silence on the line. Then my son said, Mama, what's happening? Thursday, 4 o'clock, Clary's, by yourself. I hung up. Clary's Cafe is on Abercorn Street, a few blocks from my house. Harold and I had our first real date there in 1978. I was 18, he was 21, and he ordered us both grilled cheese sandwiches because that was all he could afford, and he was too proud to ask me to split the check. I sat in a booth by the window. I was wearing my pearls. I was wearing a navy blue dress I hadn't worn in 2 years because it hadn't fit me when I was puffy from the medication, and now it fit again. He walked in at 4:03. He saw me. He stopped. I watched my son look at his mother for the first time in a very long time. He walked over to the booth slowly, like a man approaching something he wasn't sure was real. He slid into the seat across from me. He didn't say anything for a long time. Then he said, in a voice I hadn't heard from him since he was 8 years old and had lost his baseball glove, Mama, you look like yourself. I put my hand on his across the table. Terry, baby, I need to tell you some things, and I'm not going to raise my voice. I'm not going to cry. I'm not going to ask you to choose sides. I'm just going to tell you what has been happening in your mother's life for the last 3 years, and I'm going to give you some paperwork, and then I'm going to get up and walk out of here, and I want you to take the paperwork home. Not home, not to that house. Take it to your office. Take it to a coffee shop. Read it somewhere alone, and then you decide what you do next. He nodded. He was already starting to cry, and I hadn't even started yet. I talked for 20 minutes, quietly the way you talk to a patient's family in the hallway outside the ICU. I told him about the tea, about Malik, about the lorazepam in my blood work. I had the lab report in the envelope, about Harold's letter, about the trust, about Walter Pemberton. He didn't interrupt. He cried silently for most of it, the way a grown man cries, without moving his face much. When I finished, he put his forehead down on his hands on the table. I didn't look at you, Mama, he said. His voice was thick. I didn't look at you. I let her tell me who you were, and I didn't look. I know, baby. I'm a bad son. No. Terry, listen to me. You are a tired son who loved a woman who was very good at making her version of reality feel like the only one. You are not the first man that has happened to. You are not the last. You are not a bad son. How are you sitting here being kind to me? I signed those papers, Mama. I signed papers that said You signed papers your wife put in front of you when you were too tired to read. Terrence Washington, you listen to me. I am not here to punish you. I am here because I am your mother, and because I love you more than I love my own breath, and because you are about to have to do some very hard things, and I want you to know, before you do them, that whatever you decide, Terry, you are still my son, and I am still your mother, and that is the thing that is not going to change." He lost it then, full, shoulder-shaking crying in the booth at Clary's, where his parents had their first date 46 years earlier. I slid the envelope across the table. "Take this. Read it somewhere alone. I'll be at Miss Dolores Gadsden's when you want to talk. Take your time. But Terry, take Malik with you when you leave that house tonight. Don't leave that baby alone in there another night." "Mama, oh God. Malik, He's waiting for his father to come get him, baby. He's been waiting a long time." I stood up. I picked up my purse. I kissed the top of my son's head. He was hunched over the table, crying, and I walked out of Clary's cafe. The bell over the door rang behind me. For the first time in 3 years, I walked down a Savannah sidewalk on my own 2 feet, and the walk wasn't a trial, and the sun was going down gold over the live oaks, and I was Jenny Washington again, and I was going to be all right. The Sunday after Terry moved Malik out of the Abercorn house, I put on my pearls and my Sunday dress, and I went to Ebenezer Baptist. Miss Dolores walked with me. Pepper stayed home. I hadn't been in 2 years. I stopped at the bottom of the front steps. I looked up at the double doors, the heavy oak doors Harold and I had walked through for 40 years, and I thought for a second that I couldn't do it, that my legs would refuse, that the church would feel foreign. Miss Dolores put her hand on my back. "Come on, baby," she said. "They've been waiting on you." Reverend Pritchard saw me at the top of the steps. He was 73 years old. He had been my husband's best friend since 1960. He had preached my husband's funeral. He had watched his best friend's wife disappear from his congregation and had respected what he'd been told, that she was ill, that she wasn't herself, that visits were unwelcome, because that is what you do in a church community when someone says a family is struggling. He looked at me in his doorway in my navy Sunday dress with Harold's pearls around my neck, and his face did something I will never forget. He said out loud so the whole narthex could hear, "Lord Jesus, Sister Washington, Lord Jesus." And he crossed the floor in 3 long strides, and he wrapped me in his arms, and he held me for a long time. The narthex had gone quiet. I could feel people turning to look. When he finally let me go, he held me at arm's length, and he said, "Harold is standing next to you right now, Sister Jenny. I want you to know that. He is standing right next to you." I walked into the sanctuary on Reverend Pritchard's arm. My pew, the 3rd row on the left, the one Harold and I had sat in for 40 years, was mostly empty. 2 young women at the far end I didn't recognize. Otherwise empty. I sat down. Miss Dolores sat next to me. The choir started to sing "His Eye is on the Sparrow." I didn't sing at first. I just listened. I let the harmony move around me. That old harmony. Those voices I had known for 40 years. Sister Clara on the alto. Brother James on the bass. The choir director, Mrs. Eloise, keeping the tempo steady. I closed my eyes. Why should I feel discouraged? Why should the shadows come? Someone sat down next to me in the pew. I opened my eyes. Miss Dolores had moved to make room. 3 more women from my nursing class, Loretta, Diane, Mary Frances, were filing into my pew. Loretta had taken the seat next to mine. Diane sat on her other side. Mary Frances slid in next to Miss Dolores. Loretta didn't say a word. She reached over and took my hand and squeezed it so hard I thought my wedding ring would cut my finger. They had known. Somehow they had known. Miss Dolores must have called them. The choir was still singing. "I sing because I'm happy. I sing because I'm free." I started to sing. It came out rough at first. I hadn't used my voice in church in 2 years, and I had barely used it anywhere. But by the 2nd line I was singing clear, and by the 3rd line, Loretta was squeezing my hand in time with the music, and by the end of the hymn, I was singing like the woman who had sung in that pew every Sunday for 40 years of her life. "His eye is on the sparrow, and I know he watches me." I looked up at the stained glass over the pulpit, the one of Christ with the children, and I said to Harold, not out loud, just in my head, but I know he heard me, "I'm back, baby. I'm back." That was 6 months ago. I'm telling you this story from my green velvet armchair, the one Harold gave me for my 50th birthday. I've moved it back to its spot by the front window. The fiddle-leaf fig is gone. The new console table is gone. The chair is where it has been for 15 years, and it is where it is going to stay. Let me tell you what happened. Brianna was arrested on a Friday in April. The charges were aggravated battery by poison, exploitation of an elder, and, once Ruth Pemberton's testimony was brought in, along with similar documentation from Walter's son, the Beaufort County prosecutor opened a separate investigation into the death of her first husband. That case is ongoing. My case she pled out to avoid trial. 8 years in state custody. She will be eligible for parole in 5. By then I'll be 70, and Malik will be 12, and if she gets out, there are restraining orders that will last the rest of her life. Terry filed for divorce the week after she was arrested. It went through in August. He moved into a small house 2 streets over from me. He couldn't bring himself to come back to Abercorn, not yet, and I understood that. He has Malik full-time. He's in therapy. He's learning to look at people again. He comes for Sunday dinner every week, he and Malik both. Malik makes the biscuits with me now. His little hands get all over the buttermilk, and he laughs when he flours his nose, and he talks. My God, that boy talks. He talks from the second he walks in the door until the second he leaves. He has 3 years of not talking to make up for, and he is making up for them. He is in a regular 2nd grade classroom. His teachers say he is the brightest child they've seen in a decade. His therapist, a child psychologist named Dr. Benson over on Drayton Street, tells us he is doing remarkably well. Children are resilient when somebody sees them, she says. Your grandson had somebody seeing him. That is why he's going to be all right. Terry's therapist told him the same thing about me. Your mother survived because your mother is a woman who knows who she is. Even when someone tried to take that from her, underneath all of it, she still knew. I'm not sure that's true. I think I forgot for a while. But I remembered in time. That's what matters. The garden came back. I put the red dahlias in the ground the first week of May. 4 pots, 1 for each decade Harold and I had, and they bloomed by August, a blaze of claret red along the back fence. The fig tree fruited heavy this year, the heaviest it's been in years, like it had been saving up for my return. I made fig preserves, and I gave jars to Miss Dolores and Loretta and Mary Frances and to Reverend Pritchard. My mother's blue willow plates are back down from the top shelf. I eat off them every Sunday. I wear Harold's pearls on Sundays and Wednesdays and any other day I feel like it. Some days I just put them on to sit in the garden. Harold would have thought that was funny. Harold would have liked that. I have my grandmother's recipe book now. I got it out of the safe deposit box the same week Teddy filed the first paperwork. 3 lemons, zest and juice. Dark honey. Pinch of ginger. I made lemon honey tea for Malik the first time he stayed over at my house, and he sat at my kitchen table in his Spider-Man pajamas and said, "Grandma, this is the best tea I've ever had." And I told him it was his great-great-grandmother's recipe, and I was going to teach it to him so that one day he could teach it to his children. And he nodded very seriously, the way he does, and said, "Okay, Grandma, I'll remember." He will. He remembers everything. That was never his problem. I want to tell you about one more morning. It was last Tuesday. I woke up at 7, not 4:17, not 4:30, a normal 7, and I went downstairs in my slippers, and I made coffee the way my grandmother taught me. Chicory and sweetened condensed milk. My hands remembered. I carried the cup to the front window. I sat in the green velvet chair. Miss Dolores walked Pepper past my window at 7:15, like she has for 31 years, and she waved and I waved back. I took a sip of the coffee. It tasted right. I don't know when exactly I came back to myself. It wasn't the morning Malik shook his head at my tea. It wasn't the day I said I see you in the bathroom mirror. It wasn't the Sunday at Ebenezer when 3 women from my nursing class filed into my pew without a word. It wasn't even the day Brianna was arrested, or the day Terry came home to me for Sunday dinner and said, "Mama, I brought you something," and handed me a small wrapped package with Harold's old reading glasses inside. He'd found them in a box in the attic when he was moving out. He thought I might want them. All those days mattered. All those days were part of the coming back. But one morning I woke up, and the coffee tasted right again. And I knew. If you're sitting somewhere right now listening to this story, and you feel tired in a way you can't explain, listen to that tiredness. Our bodies don't lie to us. Only the world around us lies about what our bodies are telling us. I'm not saying you should suspect the people you love. I'm not saying every cup of tea has something in it. Most of them don't. Most of the people who love us are exactly what they seem. I'm just saying this. When you start to feel like you're disappearing, Don't let it happen in silence. Say it to yourself first, if you have to. Say it in the bathroom mirror the way I did. Look at the woman in the glass and say her name out loud. Tell her what she was. Tell her what she did with her life. Tell her you see her. Because if you can't see yourself, it gets very hard to ask other people to see you. And if there's a child in your life who has gone quiet, look at that child. Look at that child harder than anyone has ever looked at them. Sometimes children go quiet because they are shy. Sometimes children go quiet because they are developing differently, and that is its own beautiful thing, and it is not what I am talking about. But sometimes a child goes quiet because they are watching something they don't have words for, and they are waiting for somebody safe to speak to first. Be that person. Be the grandmother, or the neighbor, or the teacher, or the stranger on the porch swing, who a quiet child can finally trust enough to speak to. You might save a life you didn't know was in danger. You might, without meaning to, save your own. My name is Jenny Washington. I am 64 years old. I was a nurse for 37 years, and I have been Harold Washington's wife for 46, including the 4 years since he passed. I live in a blue-gray Victorian on Abercorn Street in Savannah, Georgia, with a green velvet chair by the front window and a garden full of red dahlias and a fig tree that fruits heavy in the fall. I almost disappeared. I came back. Thank you for listening. Let me know, in the comments, what city you're listening from. I read them. It matters to me to know this story has reached somebody. And take care of yourselves out there. The sky doesn't disappear. Clouds just cover it sometimes.